Well, I was just starting a career, working as a freelance. I left the safety of Italian state television in order to do that. And I had this contact from Dino De Laurentiis, who invited me to a meeting in the Grand Hotel in Roma. And he put me on a movie called Taipan. I don't remember the name of the director. Well, a big production in the history of Hong Kong, right? And I had a meeting with this director. And the director felt, again, I don't remember his name, he felt that I was not experienced enough to deal with all the VFX stuff and difficult shots and the scenes and the green screens and all that. And so after the meeting with this director, went back to see Dino De Laurentiis again and said, Dante, don't worry, I'm gonna put you with a young upcoming director, a brilliant director called Michael Mann on a movie I'm producing. It's called Manhunter. It was actually called Red Dragon early on. So I took a plane and flew to North Carolina to meet Michael Mann. And in the Wrightsville, Dino had this set of studios. And I brought with me a small reel of probably 10 shots from a movie I did with Liliana Cavani. They were dailies, actually. And the movie was called The Berlin Affair. Liliana Cavani is a very elegant director. That's the only thing I screened with Michael, and he looked at it and he said, okay, let's give it a try. We liked the idea, he liked what he saw probably. And so he gave me a reproduction of a print, which might have been a painting by Magritte. That had trees on the side, a house, a dark house in the middle, in the sky, these beautiful white clouds, an evening kind of a shot. And there was a street light in front of the house, in this street along the park, so to speak. And the street light was green, and he gave me this thing, and he said, Dante, this is the movie. All right, great. Let's do it. And it was an amazing experience, I gotta say, because for me, coming from television work and and a few movies in the Italian film industry, this was a big jump. I mean, it was like a way of filmmaking which I probably had dreamed about. It was definitely inside myself, but I it was great. I mean, I didn't think it was possible, and all of a sudden, with Michael Mann, we go into this very highly precise, to a level of science, dynamic filmmaking. Michael Mann, first of all, is very accurate in the research of his movies, everything he studied. And his filmic language is extremely dynamic. His composition is very precise. And I'm also a very good camera operator, so we had this, I think I operated the camera quite a bit in that movie. And we also had this very tight connection. Not a lot of words, if you wish. Not a lot of communication. A very strong preparation. Making a film with Michael Mann is like doing a full immersion on some kind of whatever the material is that you're working on. And again, it was very tough physically, because Michael decided that he didn't want to shoot the whole movie in Carolina, in Wilmington. And he wanted the movie to be shot all over the areas. And I love the way Michael was shooting, the use of modern architecture, the use of every possible set dressing element to convey the story, the use of modern and not modern architecture, the angles. It was really fascinating to me. I was following, it was easy for me to follow. I loved it, and it was a dream way of making movies on a cultural aesthetic side. It was a little more tough of an experience on the production side, because obviously being North Carolina, the crews were, I brought some guys from Italy. They couldn't speak English really very well. The camera crew was extraordinary. A couple of guys I brought from Italy, camera operator, although he didn't speak English, he had a great relationship with Michael, who really liked his work, and the camera assistant. And we went into a number of different things. I remember we shot a scene with Bill Peterson and and his wife before he decides to go into all this. As a policeman, he goes back into being a policeman. And we shot in Captiva, Florida. We actually shot in the house of Robert Rauschenberg, the artist, right? And we had these beautiful scenes, which, you know, Michael Mann has shown me before we started the movies, some of his scenes from his movie Thief. And he explained to me how he liked the green color to give a sense of something is not right around, you know, a sense of hyper-reality, a sense of something weird. And I introduced him to the color blue. So we have these beautiful scenes, love scenes between the cop and his wife at the beginning, Captiva, and even Rauschenberg stepped in and said, "You guys are going heavy with romanticism, right?" And so I had to test and put heavy blue gels on all the windows and the gels on all the windows. So we have these beautiful shots of them in bed, you know. And you have this outside, which is the ocean, the sun reflecting on it, which reminded me of some of the rear projection shots that you can see on movies where the two heroes, man and woman, romantically stay on the parapet of a ship, and you got this black and white moonlit ocean behind them, which was shot obviously in daytime. So I had to study out what the gels were to be, the exact amount of gels to be able to give that feeling of this ocean in the back with the moon reflecting on it.
If I really didn't need you to come back, I wouldn't ask.
And Dennis Farina comes by as a cop. He's trying to convince Bill Peterson, the hero, to go back into being a policeman and trying to figure out who this killer is, Hannibal Lecter. And the encounter happens on a beach. It was a very hot day. And so there was this huge branch of a tree, dry branch of a tree, on the beach across. And the two heroes sit on this branch of this tree. And I remember the calculation of the height of the ocean line, of the horizon behind them. And the camera starts in the sky and comes down to them. And then we go to do the two close-ups of the two over the shoulders, so-called, of the two heroes. And I see Michael is using the shape and the color and the design on the shirts, huge in the foreground, to really convey, thanks to the design of these shirts, really convey, an expression of danger or something being out of place, and and convey some atmosphere that is proper for the dialogue. And I do remember seeing this scene for the first time for me at the Todeo recording facility here in Los Angeles, and I sat down for the first time in my life in front of this huge screen. I was like, wow, this is filmmaking, man. It's really great. So I remember the last 2 days that we worked for a lot of hours to complete the movie. Ended up probably on a Sunday or a Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, after having started the previous day at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And Michael was making up himself. I mean, it's like resorting to the technique they used in the 30s. So you got a cop, and somebody is shooting this cop, and the cop loses part of his skull, right? So what happens, the camera is probably on profile, and the cop does a movement just about like that. So you pick up the same movement again, but this time, the part of the head is totally made up with blood, and Michael did all that, and you repeat the same movement, then put in a cut in between. It feels like pshum, the head of the cop is it, and so he also painted, inspired by the guideline here was this pre-Raphaelite painter William Blake, who was also, I think, the inspirer of Dollarhide, the killer. And when he lays down on the ground, dead, it was Michael himself who did all the blood with the shape of two big wings around his body. And of course, green light was streaming through the windows at dawn. And since we were shooting afternoons and dawns as well, you had this combination of green light coming in, and the sky was lightly magenta red, because it was sunrise, before sunrise. So we had the chance to photograph all these really dramatic color combinations because of the time of the day in which we were shooting. And that was also a very interesting part of the story. I do remember that, there's this very touching and human part of this story, Manhunter, where Dollarhide makes love to Reba, who's the blind woman he meets at the lab. He's working for a film lab, we find out later. So they have this love story, and Reba trusts him, and they wake up in the morning, and there's this amazing, wallpaper behind Dollarhide's bed in his house, and the camera really tilts down in the morning light towards them. And Dollarhide is sitting up and showing his chest to the camera. Reba is sleeping, lovely, beautiful. And Dollarhide has this amazing tattoo on his chest, right? And when Michael saw the dailies, we saw the dailies. Back in those days, we used to see dailies in the screening room all together. We probably still do it now, but not all the time. Michael says this tattoo is too much. I mean, the character of Dollarhide is already such a powerful character, so different, so strong, so strange, if you like, right? So out of this world, that to add a tattoo at this point is not a good idea. So we had to reshoot the scene probably the next day or 2 days later, which made me a little, very unhappy, because we were shooting with some real light coming out from the outside, from the sunrise and dawn, and it was absolutely gorgeous. In those days, I had a spectrometer, which for some reason got damaged and got locked into a T-stop. In other words, wherever you were taking the light reading, it would always give you the 5 and 6. So I had the lab writing me scared, or sending me scared phone calls. Dante, you're exposing the film too much. You're so high. And I said, listen, it looks great here, so there must be something right. But then I realized that there was this technical inconvenience, that actually lent to the movie some quality, because the movie was shot in Super 35, meaning the original negative had to be treated optically to go to an interpositive and then become the print, which was with an anamorphic, rendering print. But it was shot originally in a spherical. And so the idea of overexposing was probably somehow useful, because you had to go through these steps. And so the quality of visuals remained very energetic and very, because of the strength of the color, because of the, the compression of the shadows. There are some amazing scenes there, I gotta say. All the scenes between Reba and Dollarhide, when Reba starts realizing that she's into something that is going really wrong at night. And we had this house which was not staged, it was a real location. And Michael said, this is where we can use our green light. And so I had this arc light. I needed to use some old, they're now considered to be very old, arc lights, because I knew that at some point when Bill Peterson, Will, jumps into and crashes the glass, comes into the house, crashes into the house of Dollarhide. He flies through this window, and I know we would have had to shoot at high frame rate. And so I had to use these arc lights that were not, would not have had a problem with the camera different rates. Because if you notice in the scene up to the arrival of the police, there's some very interesting use of different camera angles. We were shooting with multiple cameras. And all of them were set at a different frame rate. Some at 75 maybe some at 48, maybe some at 52, to give a sense of of being out, you know, of being out of logic in the editing, and I had a dynamic which was kind of very offsetty, if you wish, and that was done, I think, in a very masterful way.
I'm sorry, too.
Excuse me?
Well, I can say that he was a very pleasant person to work with. And it's good that he was like that, because, because I do remember one morning in which our camera is behind us, a couple of monitors. I think he's in a hotel room and or in the FBI office. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, he's watching these monitors, and that's when he's discovering who is the killer. He gets to the point that he, you know, when he says the phrase, you've seen these films, meaning he understands that this guy is probably working in a film lab. You know, in those days, everybody was shooting 8mm films in the family. We actually started shooting the movie, shooting some family 8mm shots, you know, here and there. So Bill Peterson is watching these films, and it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and we are shooting this stuff on his face. Then he goes to a window, leans against the window, and said, "You've seen these films."
Leeds Can, Gateway Labs, St. Louis, Missouri.
The Jacoby label will say the same thing as the Leeds label. Gateway Labs, St. Louis, Missouri.
Who processed the Jacoby film? No. Bob's Photo Store, Birmingham.
Stores send them out. Have him peel the top label back.
Is there a label underneath?
Does, doesn't it?
And I do remember making a huge amount of takes to get to that point. I don't remember if we did 40 or more. And the whole idea is probably that Michael insisted on this because he didn't want any acting involved. So it was, the fatigue that, you know, the Bill was so fatigued in doing this over and over again that in the end, he was himself. You know, it was a very truthful, you know, way of saying the line, I would expect. But his patience, definitely, you know, is when he goes back and he decides to do, you know, to go back into trying to discover who this killer is. Again, you know, he's had an experience with Hannibal Lecter before, so he, from which he was very disturbed. So he can get into the mind of the criminal. He has a sensitive way of getting there. So he goes visit this house where the killer has destroyed the family, right? And he walks up the steps and turned out very well. I do remember that I did rig, I asked my crew to rig the place with some soft light on top, figuring out, you know, it's the first time I worked with Michael Mann. I wasn't really that sure in which direction we wanted to go. And Michael saw this and said, no, Dante, don't. You don't need that. Don't do that. So, okay, I said, okay. So we took down those lighting, and we made the whole scene much more dramatic.
Thank you for using AT&T. This is Operator 24.
Operator, I don't have the use of my arms. Would you be so kind as to dial a number for me, please?
Certainly. What's the number?
Area code 301-555-6624.
We started shooting with Brian, you know, the very early days of shooting were on a stage at Wilmington, in the De Laurentiis stages in Wilmington. And then, again, at the beginning of the movie, we start doing the scene of the encounter between Will and Hannibal Lecter. So Will goes to the prison to see him, and the whole prison is painted white. And you know, and Will has his shirt, which is a very meaningful shirt with an interesting design. And Brian Cox starts acting, and that's where I realized that the tenseness on the set was very, very high. Michael Mann's concentration on the subject was total. And, so the acting and the performance and the lining up of the camera, making use of the bars of the prison, right? Everything was painted white. And so the composition coming from one side to the other side, if you look at it, you have to admire the flow and the beauty of this, the flow of the editing that in a way is a lovely, soft, ongoing, very harsh instead, kind of examining the criminal human mind, or the human mind of a criminal.
Hello?
Molly?
Is that you?
Yeah, it's me, honey. Look, I'll call you tomorrow. Go back to sleep. I love you.
I love you too, baby.
Kim was beautiful. She's absolutely lovely to work with, and I do remember. We finished shooting one day, and of course Michael had friends in Miami because he'd done the whole Miami Vice series, and he had a couple guys who owned two huge speedboats, powerful speedboats. So that night we took this with a group of friends. We took the speedboats, and we crossed the bay, and went to a bar that was on the other side to have a drink. And Kim Grice was there, Michael was there, probably Dennis Farina, Guzmano Cesaretti was one of Michael's main collaborators, and we all went there. We had a beautiful drink. As we took off to come back, both speedboats had the engine fail, believe it or not. So all of a sudden we found ourselves in the middle of this bay, laying down on the chairs of these speedboats, looking at the sky, which was gorgeous, and chatting with the Kim Grace and Michael Mann about, philosophy of life, movie making, and finally somebody came to rescue, and we barely made it back for 7 o'clock in the morning to start the next day's work in Captiva, right? But I still remember an image of walking down the jetty, where Will is looking at this engine, this boat, and there are a lot of seagulls around, and we shot high speed, and the change in focus, and the composition, and Michael Mann's composition. I mean, he really inspired a lot of filmmakers. In those kind of very interesting composition, because they made use of costume design and props and set dressing in a way that was really adding to the story deep meaning, right?
Hear it?
Was a morning we shot on the stages in Wilmington, Carolina, Dino De Laurentiis stages. And this great animal trainer, who was also a zoo owner, brought there this tiger, right? This beautiful tiger, and which was anesthetized, of course, And in the middle of a stage in Carolina, they put a kind of a big net all around. They made a structure with a net, and so there was this big tiger laying down on a table. The net was around the set. It was a small set, which was, I think, a lab or something, which had some very interesting lamps. By the way, this lab, parenthesis, very interesting lamps. And Michael told me, "Have you seen War of the Worlds, the first movie?" That was the kind of design, which was a postmodern kind of design in America in the 40s. Anyway, very interesting. Anyway, this big tiger is laying down, a very small set. We receive a speech from the trainer at the beginning who says, listen guys, the situation should be okay for 40 minutes. You have to be really careful, don't talk all the time, and don't make too much noise. If anything goes wrong, I'll let you know, and you just take off, you get out of the stage. All right, so we come in very shy and very cautious about these tigers, 2 cameras shooting here and there. And all of a sudden the crew starts having we all start having a more comfortable attitude. We see this beautiful animal breathing normally, laying down at the scene with John Allen who touches the tiger, caresses him. And but at some point, some time goes by, so we pick up some confidence in doing this. But at some point, some time goes by, and the tiger does something with the tail. Just does boom, boom. We all noticed that. I guarantee you, in seconds, everybody was out on the stage in a matter of seconds.
Mr. Dollarhide,
Eileen.
Bill told me to tell you there was a variation in the gamma of number 3. But he caught it in time.
Eileen, good.
Tom, a very nice guy, a very wonderful, concentrated actor, but he wouldn't talk to anybody. His idea was that he didn't want to familiarize with everybody. He wanted to stay in his character. And I also learned very soon from Guzmano Cesaretti, who was my friend and Michael Mann's collaborator, that he wanted to be called, he didn't want to be called Thomas or Tom. He wanted to be called Dollarhide. That's the only way we could address him. And, well, obviously, his physical presence was incredible. I remember this very interesting scene in Atlanta, where we went to a famous furniture factory. And Michael used that as the lab. Some parts of the cafeteria was the lab. So there was still some skylight outside, these big windows outside, I remember. And the top lights were very vertical, and Tom Noonan has this quick dialogue with somebody in there, and this light from the top, and these camera angles, and in this very interesting architecture, which was in Atlanta. This building, I think it was Harmon, the Harmon Miller was the furniture factory. Beautiful design and architecture, and we did an exterior shot, an establishing shot from outside, which was shot at twilight, I remember, possibly at dawn, but I think it was probably twilight. And then we used the interior of the cafeteria. The interior of the lab itself, instead we shot in Chicago, the very famous film lab in Chicago. And we added a couple of interesting fluorescents here and there, which is when we see Dollarhide checking the films and understand that he has to do with this. There is this scene at Dollarhide's house where he has the journalist in front of him. And we have this low angle of him with the stocking on his face.
Well, here I am.
For some reason, it was all working great because all those, spooky lights that were set in there with the set dressing, some very basic lighting that I did made the atmosphere a very interesting atmosphere. And then I remember his understanding when we did that shot of the journalist running down a garage incline. He was on fire. Obviously, it was a dummy on it. But we had to do a very special protection on the camera. So we, as a crew, we didn't really understand what we were supposed to do for some reason. Our grip crew was Italian. There wasn't enough communication. And so it took a little while to do that setup, I remember. But even there again, with this fluorescence around and the red flames coming right into the camera. I mean, I've done a number of movies with Brad, and I totally enjoyed every movie I did with him. It's a very different film. The only difference between Manhunter and Red Dragon is that I didn't need to read the screenplay so many times because I basically knew the storyline, so I could limit myself to a smaller number of readings to understand what was going on and to understand how to make it. But listen, I mean, the production design was entirely different. Directing was different. The cast was entirely different. I had some magical experience working with Anthony Hopkins, you know, and being by the camera and watching Tony Hopkins perform was just something that I really high level kind of thing. So you don't forget that easily, you know, when he's tied up with his hands and goes through these very hot lights and he's talking again to this time to still to Will. So I mean, standing next to the camera and next to Ed Norton, and watching Tony Hopkins perform, you know, in this hot light and being angry and attacking. I mean, the real expression of an evil mind, you know, a human brain that's turned into that is so evil, and see how he was expressing that. So two very different movies. So for me, it was like, you know, two different approaches, two different studies, two different, you know. Every movie belongs to its epoch, you know. So it also carries with itself some ways of doing things, which are related to the technology that they had in those days, and it makes a lot of sense that that's the way they are made. You know, right now you probably see them in a different way, or maybe imagine some other stuff because of changes in the technique and technology. But when a movie is so strongly made, as so innovating as Manhunter is, you see it again, and you do feel that everything really belongs there. And it was you know, Umberto Eco used to say that there's no art if there's not a step forward in the way you communicate with an audience, right? Because you use different symbols, because you use different ways of doing things. In that case, you make a step forward, and you can't come back. And you make the step forward for everybody. But I think Manhunter is one of those films where major step forwards were made in the way films, you know, communicate to an audience, especially those kind of movies. And it's all still there. You know, it's all very interesting, very effective. It's all there to be studied.
How long do I have?
20 minutes max.
Main thing to find out is how was Lecter supposed to reply to him? Which is probably the missing section. Because at the top it says, I hope we can correspond. Then comes the gap. This note was written in ballpoint. But it looks like Lecter went over this area with a felt tip pen and tore it away.
I've been doing a number of classes to students, and you know, whether it's in colleges or university or stages set up somewhere, what the students want to know about is mostly, I've done a lot of movies in my career, my working life, but most of what the students want to know about is Michael Mann and how he made Manhunter, and what about The Last of the Mohicans. There's something magical in the way Michael has to do with telling a story with film that is, first of all, it's his very own, and then it's material for dream, it's material for movie making, it's material for make you feel something when you're in theater.